Okay, right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Run Chat Live. My name is Matt Phillips, for those of you who haven't tuned in with us before. And I am here in the wonderful Studio 57 clinic and StrideUK, located in Hove on the south coast of England. So if you haven't seen this before, then basically our mission statement is to bring evidence, to put some evidence back into the often erroneous misconceptions and just plain mistakes associated with running injury and running performance. So this podcast, maybe a podcast one day, this web chat is for therapists and runners who want to kind of help clarify some of the misconceptions in our industry. And in doing so, I try and bring on some special guests, experts in the field, people from the world of running and personal training and coaching and strength and conditioning, to help give them a chance to share their experiences with you guys watching. So I'm very excited about this morning's guests. We've got two for you, and they are going to be live from Kenya, Nairobi. And we've got James Parks, who is the founder and director of Run Beyond, who's the company who I had the pleasure of going out and working with in helping set up the Gait Analysis that they're going to be offering. Plus, they're going to be doing footwear and coaching, strength and conditioning, all sorts of wonderful stuff. And also with Jeff, we're going to have legendary elite Kenyan distance running coach, Jimmy Simba Beauttah, or Coach Simba, as we call him, who I'm very much looking forward to. If you haven't heard of him, then Google him. He's all over. Basically, he's one of the 2 or 3 Kenyan coaches who are the godfathers of the distance elites. So without further ado, I'm going to bring these guys in and say good morning to them. So let's bring them in now. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Matt.
Can you hear me okay?
You call me George.
Oh, so too official. I always start off being really formal, but you'll notice that as time goes on, it'll get very informal. So thank you so much for joining us. I just gave you a little bit of an intro. How are things? Tell us where you're from, as in where are you now at this moment in time?
Where are we now? Is line okay? Have you got an echo?
I haven't got an echo on my end.
Perfect. We're in what is to become Run Beyond, the first specialist running shop in Kenya. You can probably see it from the ceiling and the scaffolding in the background. We're not quite there yet, but hopefully come mid-Jan we'll be up and running.
Fantastic. I look forward to that. So basically, yeah, people may have read my blog. I mean, I had the pleasure and the honor of you inviting me over to Nairobi in Kenya, and we had some great times over there with going out and running in the Karura. Is it Karura Forest?
Yeah, that's right. Karura.
Yeah, Karura Forest, which was just exceptional. And I met some wonderful people, and I myself had some total misconceptions about Kenya and Nairobi and East Africa and just Africa in general, cleared up wonderfully. And in Karura Forest, I remember, I mean, it was just exceptional. For you guys, it was like another day at work, just seeing Lorna. Is it Lorna Kidbushat? Is that her there? Yeah?
Yeah.
She is, yeah. She was there taking one of her elite kind of training camps. But then, of course, we had our own elite coach. We didn't have to worry about getting Lorna in, because there you can just see the mystical figure of Coach Simba taking us for a training routine there. So Coach Simba, if I could turn to you first, if that's okay. Check it out. Look at that. So you're telling me that you didn't know that picture was being taken?
I didn't know.
That is fearful. That is fearful. But apparently you started off in boxing, didn't you?
Yes, in karate, martial.
Yeah, I can believe it. I can believe it. And is that where the Simba name came from? Simba obviously meaning lion, but is that where the nickname came from?
It's a name from my grandfather.
Ah, right.
When I came.
Easy. Don't it all go off. Wow.
That's,
So how did you go from boxing to coaching elites?
Oh, right. After doing a bit of boxing and karate, then there was music. This was family talent. And when I thought of getting some punches on my jaws and singing, that would not go. So I thought of keeping it aside and being a sparring partner. And then after that, with music, you needed a good breathing system. So I started doing road running, keep myself fit for that. And with that, then where I was from the village in Mombasa, then I got some young men who are interested in getting fit. So we started a grouping of keeping ourselves fit, running, bodybuilding, and so.
Fantastic. And so what was the first kind of, were you all up, because obviously you worked in Eldoret for many years, but was that the first place you started training at?
Not really. After serving the Navy, I joined Kim McDonald International Management. This is a management that took care of Daniel Komen.
All right.
And Kiptanui. And then we had John Kibawan, three-time gold medalist in the 4K. We had Ben Limo, just to name a few. But there were a lot of
Daniel Komen, I'm sure a few of the people watching, whether they're live or watching the recording, will be familiar with. So he was 5,000 meter world champion, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Yeah. So you were involved in coaching him?
Yes, I was. At a place called Nyahururu.
And did you see his progression then? What are some of the things which you might have seen or changed or worked on, or?
Yes, the long strides, making them a bit quick in cadency, and then strengthening the upper body and psyching up.
Brilliant. So it's amazing. What always amazes me is 20 years later, we're talking about cadence as if it was something new and technology, just because we've got a machine that can go beep, 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 and count it. 20 years ago, with the world champion 5,000 meters, you're already talking about stride length. You're already doing that stuff. You don't need a machine. You're talking about strengthening and that sort of stuff. So I think it's a good wake-up call for a lot of runners to realize that all this flashy, this is new, brand new stuff. It's not new at all. You guys were doing it 20 years ago. Yeah. So when was it you actually moved to Eldoret? Because I think a lot of viewers are probably familiar with the Rift Valley and the kind of champions it's produced. When did you move up there?
That was in 2003.
2003. And that was at the famous, it was one of the training camps set up by the International Athletics Federation, wasn't it? It was one of their hubs.
Yes, that was the High Performance Center, IF. It's like an academy.
Yeah. Is that the gate to it?
Yeah, that's a get to Kip's house.
Oh, his house, is it? Oh, right, because he was involved in that, wasn't he? Initially, people aren't familiar with Kip Keino. He was obviously the 68
gold medalist
surprise in the Mexico. We talked about him I think a couple of weeks ago, because some people might not be aware that not only was it amazing that he won and it was such an exciting race, but apparently he'd been diagnosed with gallstones and told not to run like prior. I think he'd had a couple of races before that where he'd failed and not won, but he just somehow, it's very painful. Anyone who's had gallstones will know. And that kind of set the scene for Kenyans being such strong, persistent, put up with any sort of paying runners. And we talked about what is it that makes Kenyans have such a history. Have you got any ideas? Is it nature? Is it genetics? Or is it nurture? Is it because of amazing coaches like you? What is it that produces so many champions in Kenya, men and women?
It all started through the colony governments. They brought about competing of the counties and the chiefs and the headmans, and giving people sufurias. You know, sufuria is the cooking pot, and blankets as prizes. That was when the competitive tune came in. And then there was the formation of the Kenya 3 years in the 50s. And it kept growing, and people came to like the competitiveness. And then also after that, it became a lifeline. Right. When competition came about with a lot of rewards. And so it was for good health and also as a lifeline.
And is there some genetics there? I mean, because in the UK, we're always talking about how I've read that. I mean, Kenyan runners, for example, they've got skinnier calves. It makes it easier for them to run. Is that overrated, or is there some genetic predisposition as well there that favors them?
I don't believe that, because while I was at the High Performance Center, we were also taking care of foreign athletes. And I can remember that people came there and improved.
All right, that's interesting.
For example, there was an athlete from Sri Lanka. There was an athlete from Mali, where traditionally they're kind of sprinters. And they brought in one athlete from Mali, a 400-meter runner, and they wanted him to be a 800-meter. He came with a time of 1:51 when he joined the camp. And after that, he managed to go to 1:46. And this is not a Kenyan, this is someone from Mali. And then the other athlete from Sri Lanka, well, he came with 3:45. After going through some training, he did 3:39. So
wow.
You see.
Yeah. So it's not genetics at all. It's because of people like you.
I don't believe in that. Just give me an offer and give me time.
Wow. I'll give you a here then, Kate. I want to give you
what was that? What was the first bit before give me time? Give me an athlete and give me time.
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Wow, that's a t-shirt waiting to be made. Give me an athlete and give me time. Coach Simba. Brilliant. I love it. Okay, so that's amazing. Yeah, so it's food for thought, definitely. So let's move on to, I mean, obviously the Rift Valley as well in itself, and the whole area is the high altitude. That makes a difference. Does it training? You in favor of the idea of training at high altitude? Does that help produce champions as well?
For long distance?
Yeah.
The purpose of being at a high altitude, it's as we learn from the science, that it gives you the opportunity of developing red blood cells. And the red blood cells are the transportation of blood in the body. So, and that is something that you need for long distance running. So,
and again, that science was there 20 years ago, was it? You were aware that that was why you could produce results, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it just does my brain in, because we all think that, I suppose it's every generation thinks that what we read now is we invented it. You know, it's like people thinking, you know, we invented music. you were playing the drums long before Tommy Lee Jones, or not Tommy Lee Jones. Yeah, Tommy Lee Jones. No. We haven't got time to move into your music history, but another time maybe we'll do a music special.
Okay.
Brilliant. How did you meet George then? How did that happen?
Meeting George.
Yeah.
He got an information from someone, and then he decided to call me. It was fortunate that I was in Nairobi at that time, because after that I was in Mombasa taking care of a soccer team.
He just got promoted.
Yeah. So we met, and he gave me the picture of what he's planning to do.
Yeah.
And I thought, let's get together and see the baby growing.
I see the baby growing. Yeah.
You see the baby.
He's quite a persuasive little guy, isn't he? I don't mean little as in, yeah, but he's quite persuasive, isn't he? I remember when I first received an email saying, come to Nairobi, you know, and help us start this business up. And, you know, in the UK, when you get an email saying, come to Nairobi, or, you know, send us your bank account details, you know, we've got a certain, I don't know, we're a bit cynical. I remember telling some friends going, yeah, I got this LinkedIn notice from a guy in Nairobi saying, yeah, come over, do this and that. So I was getting all sorts of warnings. But it was eventually when George actually came to UK and I met him face to face that I realized that he wasn't kind of, you know, after my organs or anything. It was actually a really nice chap, which was nice. And so, yeah, no, it was amazing. We had some great times over there. So, right, thank you, Coach Simba. I'm going to hand you over to George now, who's going to tell us a little bit about his story. So, George, let's wind back a little bit. Where were you from originally? Where were you born?
I'm from Lichfield.
From Lichfield. People might have noticed already watching that George isn't a native Kenyan from Nairobi. You might have picked up on that fact. But yeah, from Lichfield. How did you end up from Lichfield in Nairobi?
So first came after university, sort of a typical cliched gap year program. We came out and we taught at a primary school down on the floor of the Rift in a place called Gilgil. So I met my wife at the airport when we arrived back in 2005. And yeah, we spent 6 months, you know, mainly teaching. That's where we were. Also running. There wasn't, as you can see, too much around. Not a lot to do. So you know, we were running 4 or 5 times a week, and this was when I was much lighter, a little bit fitter than what I am today. And at the end of it, we did there's a marathon here called the Labour Downs Marathon, which is up near Mount Kenya in a game reserve. And I did the full, and I said, look, T, I'll you know, she said, how long will you be? I'll be there at the finish. I said, oh, around 3.5 hours. Anyway, 5.25 hours, I come in, absolutely dead. And you know, this was before we could afford a Garmin or anything like that, so we'd had no idea how far or how fast we'd been running, and we'd clearly been running a lot shorter and a lot slower than I thought. But then went back home and yeah, started running PBs. The difference was incredible.
Yeah, I noticed the altitude. I remember you saying when we went to Karura Forest, and it was like, Matt, be prepared, because, you know, even though we're running this tempo, you might feel like in the lungs. I was like, yeah, I've heard all about it, but yeah, I was like draining. I was sucking in air. It makes a big difference out there. It's
the hills. It's when you hit that altitude, I find it really, you know, on the flat you can sort of, you're okay, but when you start, Coach sent us up to do hill training last weekend. You know, when you're on the hills, you really feel it. And yeah, coming back down after six months, I went from a 123 half to a 119, which yeah,
brilliant.
Which I gave Paul Radcliffe a run for our money in do you remember the Run London events?
Yes, yeah.
You know, I wasn't too far behind her, but she was 8 months pregnant, so
yeah, you lost me there. Tell me, you sent, I mean, this photo just brings a whole new meaning to the idea, where's Wally, is where's George, but yeah. Where was this, what was this race?
So this is a Moshi. Teresa and I went back to London after Kenya, and then 5 years later, I got us common out to Tanzania. I was working with KPMG at the time, and we've just spent 8 years in Tanzania. That's the start of the Kilimanjaro Marathon up in Moshi.
Brilliant, love it. What a great photo. And you ended up, so before you actually were over there teaching originally, weren't you?
Yeah, so that, yeah, originally 2005. This is when we first came out and we volunteered. So this was the school that we were in, a place called Godfathers. Then we went there back in 2012. I think the next photo is our wedding. We got married at the school. It was something of a they call it a Shamba wedding out here.
Fantastic, amazing. And you got family now there and everything, who I've had the pleasure of meeting. Two lovely children.
Well, I'm glad you said pleasure. Not everyone would say that. Yeah, we've got 2 boys, Benji and Bobby. That's Benji, I guess, about 8 months old, in Amboseli Park, which is on the border of Kenya and Tanzania. That's Kilimanjaro. You can see in the background. That's where we went, Matt. But unfortunately, you didn't quite get to see the mountain, I don't think.
I did. Well, maybe we'll talk about that experience later on. I put out, I don't know if you saw on social media, I put out my Trapped by Elephants on a Skinny Bridge Part 1, just for people to have a look at. But yeah, we'll have a little look at that.
Not recording you free Britain myself, I hope, because that would be a little bit embarrassing.
Oh, I do hope we have time to show some of them. Yeah. So and then yeah. So where did Run Beyond and the idea of that come from?
So actually, before we got married, I quit my job and started looking at what else I could do, and I started talking with a guy called Vince Ochieng. He's still a good friend of ours. He does various running things. He's got if you Google Runners Point Eton, you'll see pictures of his first store that he set up in Eton. Young lad. His dad was a professional cyclist. His brothers were into cycling. He got into cycling and running, and later at university got taught to swim. Became the national triathlon champion. Has been represented Kenya at the Commonwealth Games and in duathlon world championships. But he started an NGO training kids from Kibera, which is where he's from, the biggest slum in Nairobi, trying to get them out of poverty for athletics, and he's still doing that. And what we started talking about, probably must have been about 2012, 2013, was at the same time we had a lot of the kids who we taught at the school who didn't matter how smart they were. They, some of them, managed to get through secondary school. They managed to get probably the best grade was a C+, which for Kenyan standards, going through the government system is really, really good. But it's just so competitive here. None of the kids that we were taught back in 2005 had jobs. So we started looking at what we could do with them. And the initial idea was an altitude training camp, but not in Eton for professionals, more around where the school was and more targeted at amateur runners. The idea being close enough to attract people from Nairobi for weekends. You're closer to the tourist attractions, so have people come out and do training camps, but go to the Masai Mara or climb Mount Kenya, or there's Lake Nakuru and Lake Naivasha either side. I then got a job, so that kept me busy for another 4.5 years. But then actually my old boss, I think it must have been about September 2016, said, "Oh, look, I've got a lady who wants to start a running shop in Tanzania. Are you interested in working with her?" And so the idea sort of morphed into a shop, which I think there's probably a bit more opportunity for, is a bit lower risk. And as a market, Nairobi is a much stronger market. So we started working on that idea, and that's got us to where we are today. And the same guy actually introduced me to Lucy, who you met when you were out here, who runs an organisation for veterans with mental health challenges called True North. And before we moved, we thought, well, what can we do to support each other? And that's where the running group came from. So we did the Standard Chartered. That's the team for the Standard Chartered that we did in October. That largely came through Lucy and trying to promote True North.
Brilliant. Yeah. And then eventually you ended up in this place which you're in now, which I know very well. I had the pleasure of being there for a few days. We even got Coach Simba to start kind of going back to school a little bit. people. So yeah, so one of the reasons I got out there is because you seem, and one of the reasons, you know, I thought this is a great opportunity to help spread a good message, is you seem very much into wanting to provide a kind of an evidence-based service, both in terms of coaching and gait analysis and shoe recommendations. And I mean, I know that any therapist watching this will be familiar with the names of the courses and people that you've got involved with. You've chatted with Ian Griffiths, you've Craig Payne's online course, which is fantastic. You're familiar with, yeah, a lot of, you've been to see Brad Neal and James Dunn with their course in London. So you're kind of the eternal student yourself. What was it? I mean, when I came and delivered the course, we already knew that what we were going to do was basically what you'd read about and what you were kind of tuned into. But what was some of the things which you learned from the course which made you think, yeah, that's what I need to let people here know, that's the service I want to provide?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, a lot, yeah, for me, it's been the whole it's been a bit of a journey in my own running. You know, I'm your sort of typical recreational UK runner who, you know, would go out of his door, run, not warm up, not cool down, not do any strength exercises. Yeah, and personally, sort of wanting to offer that, like you say, evidence-based, or, you know, just basically want to offer the best advice we can for runners. You know, got me doing my own research, got me doing, yeah, I did the UK athletics coaching courses, and, you know, just starting doing my own strength training and seeing the difference that that made to me as a, you know, as certainly more of a plodder than I am today. You know, suddenly feeling much stronger when I'm running. You know, being more conscious of my own form, and it's sort of made my own running a much more exploratory journey. And you know, certainly looking at making shoe recommendations, and with you know, certainly the large amount of conflicting and, you know, non-conclusive evidence out there on what is important, you know, for shoes. I think you know, for me, the Brooks white paper was quite, that they published back in 2013, you know, around preferred pathways and stuff like that. You know, I don't think that's necessarily translated yet into a great retail model, but it's certainly, you know, and I think the next photo, I know you'll come back and talk about Haile Gebrselassie, but you know, the next photo that you've got from that's in the white paper, you know, it's quite influential on me in terms of, you know, what's important in a shoe and what's important in a shoe recommendation, and also how much, you know, people can be supported to improve their running or reduce their injury risk by looking at other things, you know, much more than just a shoe. So that's sort of where we're coming from.
Were you referring to the Ian Hunter shot of the Olympic trials 10K one? Yeah, I'll bring it up full here. It's quite an amazing photo by Ian Hunter. For anyone who hasn't seen it yet, yeah, so we're looking basically at foot strike patterns of photos that he's captured with the fastest men and women at the USA Olympics. It was 10K trials, and you can see from the names up here, I mean, we've got Galen Rupp there in the guys, and on the women as well. I mean, looking at the times, these are elite athletes, and the difference, the variety in, not just between the fact that they're not all, for example, landing on the forefoot, the fact they've all got shoes on, so that should quieten down the barefoot kind of gurus a little bit, but also the difference between a left foot and a right foot, you know. So it means that we can't, yeah, we've got to move away from this idea that one size fits all with certain shoes. And yeah, it's a great photo, which I think a lot of the course was based on.
Yeah, like, you know, the philosophy of trying to get the shoe that best matches the runner, rather than to normalize, you know, we have to be in a shoe that normalizes somebody's running motion. I find a much more compelling philosophy. You know, the challenge is, how do you work with that in a retail setting at the moment? Because I don't think there is, you know, even if you look at what, you know, where Brooks have taken it, I think where they are today, they've still, you know, they've still got a long way to go to sort of realize, you know, what the approach that they've started down.
Yeah, no, very tricky. I think that's the crutch of the problem, is having a business model that's going to work, because we know that the only research
Careful about that, man. Online. Yeah, don't get me in too much trouble.
But yeah, I mean, I think things are getting much better. One of the great things about the Barefoot Explosion and the Born to Run is that now we haven't just got 3 types of shoes to choose from. There's a huge selection, and runners are being given confidence that they do need to kind of potentially move back towards what the runners of the kind of like 70s and 80s were wearing, as long as you're strong enough. So that's the huge difference. Because like Coach Simba, I asked you off camera earlier on how much of a factor shoes were like 20 years ago when you were raising kind of world champions. How did you decide what shoe an athlete back in, for example, Kiprop, for example, Abel Kiprop, how did you decide what shoes were best for him?
Abel Kiprop. Well, we didn't have really special things for him, but then while we were at the high altitude center in Eldoret, Adidas was the main sponsor of the camp. But later, when he excelled and got a manager, then he went into Nike.
All right.
Yeah, it was not a matter of getting special things for him. It was a matter of getting something better for him to train him, how to train him. Thereafter, when he got more professional, then something special could have come. But then there was not something special on the early days. It was just a matter of getting something good for the foot to train on.
So what was it again? You said he moved from Adidas to Nike. What was it that made him? Was it he wasn't getting on with Adidas, or was it just a sponsorship thing, or?
Because the manager was he had maybe a contract with Nike or something. So most of the athletes were using Nike.
Yeah.
Nike facilities.
I do wonder sometimes. I mean, there's even some classic footage on the YouTube of even runners who, I can't remember who it was now. It might be Mo Farah, but somebody who even lost a shoe halfway through a race and they've managed to still win just with one shoe on their foot. And I wonder how that affects the shoe companies. If you win with just one shoe on and one bare foot, how does that kind of enter the equation? I personally still think that shoes have a relevance, but they're at the top of the pyramid. Okay, they're here at the top. First, you've got to have your strength and your loading and your training and your consistency and all that. And the shoe technology is going to come at the top. You can get injured in the wrong shoe, but you can get injured in any shoe. We just don't know what causes it yet. So shoes are massively important, obviously, but there's so much that people need to look at before they think that a shoe is going to solve their issues. But anyway, so we digress onto shoes. So the Gait Analysis, George, we went with, or you decided to go with MotionMetrix in the end, which is the same as we use in StrideUK, which made it easier for me to kind of present it. But yeah, how did you get on with MotionMetrix? You obviously liked the system. What was it you liked about it?
For me, it's the conversations that it opens up with the runner. Going back to your pyramid, certainly, to a certain extent, programming and loading, but definitely when you're talking about strength and conditioning and form, MotionMetrix is just a really great window into that discussion. I don't think I've seen a better window into it, and I think the shot that you're putting up there with the triangle of elastic exchange, I think that's a real interesting change that they've made since I came and saw it in your clinic last February. I think that opens up a really good conversations about both form and strength. But otherwise, how do you make that real to someone? How do you make them understand really the benefits of what they can get out of strength? I loved your example of referring to running as a series of one-legged hops. and the pogo stick versus a slinky analogy. I think they're good analogies, and I think MotionMetrix is a great, it's the best way that I've seen to sort of have that conversation with a runner. And like I say, looking to do more than just prescribe a shoe. How otherwise in a retail setting, how do you get into that conversation? So for me, the gait analysis is less around shoe prescription and more about how can you support a runner to get more out of the sport, either by performance or reducing their injury risk by looking at where the foot strike is, or particularly around overstriding rather than the type of foot strike. Looking at how they can tweak their cadence in both directions. Not aiming for 180 if they've not got the strength, but also if they're very slow and ploddy and you would call them more a fatiguer. Having a conversation around how they can get a little bit more out of every stride by perhaps trying to increase their cadence by 5-10%.
Yeah, fantastic. This is all music to my ears. You've picked it up very well. Well done, Grasshopper. That's been good. And the people who are on the course as well seemed really tuned in with it. Yeah, the elastic or the efficiency, it ties in really well. We were talking to Ian Griffiths a while ago on an episode back about how it is about concentrating less on the kinematics, less on what's happening visually in terms of movement, and more on the forces. Are you able to generate the necessary forces? Are the forces going to the right tissue, and so on? Which makes gait analysis, I think, a lot more productive. On the course, we spent some time comparing the classic kind of Gazelle versus the glider scenario, because that was filmed by Todd. I was trying to give this guy credit because it's been used on so many websites. I can't remember his name.
Todd Kenyan on the bottom.
It was a bike fit, wasn't it? It was a triathlete. But yeah, we looked at the differences between the glider and the Gazelle in terms of how some elite triathletes in particular, Ironman, will have a high cadence and kind of looks like they haven't got as much flight time, and they will still produce fantastic results. And then others tend to be the Gazelles, who will have a slightly lower cadence, still above 185 in the case of the elites, but they have much more flight time. They'll be up in the air, and we try to kind of show how this transfers to our recreational runners. And if you are going to be a Miranda Carfrey or Chrissy Wellington, it's not just a case of speeding up your cadence or slowing down your cadence. You've got to get the strength. You've got to make sure that every time your foot lands, you're going to generate that force and actually fly through the air, because without any flight time, you're going to get to A to B in a fairly long time. You want that free traveling through the air time. So yeah, it definitely helps promote strength training and plyometric strength training, having elastic strength, not just being big and strong. It's got to be running fitness, running strength. So yeah, I'm glad that point got through. Coach Simba, you mentioned it was early on. It's been on my mind. You mentioned for the shorter races, so moving away from marathons and half marathons, you were training athletes for upper body strength. Is that right? Yeah. What do you think is your take? Is that something which becomes less important as you move to distance runners, or is it still important for distance runners to have upper body strength?
It's also important to have the body strength for the long distance runners. And well, as you can see, a long time back, the Kenyan athletes were more so in the endurance side of it. They forgot to work on their sprinting ability. And some years later, people got closer to Kenyans because other people went and tried to get the endurance, and they had the sprinting ability with them. So when they could hold for some time with a Kenyan, when it goes to the finishing, then there it counts. If you don't have the strength to pump for the last few meters, you lose the rest.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So definitely the distance runners can learn a lot from the sprinters in terms of, that perseverance, especially at the last sprint at the end.
Well, I think my conversations I've had with Coach, I'd say you're very much in favour of people focusing on 1,500 metres. You know, for you, the real runners are the 1,500 metre runners, and those guys will make it a marathon, rather than the people who try to shortcut it.
And then grow from there.
Yeah.
100 meters is the mother. It's the mother of long distance, because there you need endurance, you need the strength, and you need the sprinting ability.
But would you, so you say strengthen the upper body, so would you advise distance runners to still be doing like upper body strength exercises like bench press and shoulder press and
specific exercises? You don't go developing muscles that you don't require, because that will be an extra weight in the system. So you need to have the head there, you have to have the brain there to see that you're working on specific muscle structure that you'll need in your running. You don't
I saw photos of you,
bodybuilder, because you don't want to be a nightclub peacekeeper.
Peacekeeper, is that what you call them? I've seen photos of you with runners with kind of like pulling weights up hills and stuff like that. I guess when you're doing any form of whole body strength exercise, you're developing the upper body, pumping the arms and developing the core and everything anyway. So yeah, like you say, specific strength training. Yeah, that's great.
That's like more sort of recreational runners. The way Coach does it, I find fantastic. It's because it's all it's all based around movement and what you do when you run, and it's not like you're going out and you're having to do mentally going to the gym to lift weights or anything. One of the favorites he does is he gets a power band, like one of the they're probably about 1 meter long. Elastic band, and he'll put 2 of us in it, and he'll make us run. Making sure we're keeping the knee highs up in opposite directions, and we started doing it. What's this about? But
skipping ropes.
You do that for 45 seconds, and you can feel like it tests everything. And skipping. Well, the skipping. You see, Kenyans, I think, particularly our generation, still skipped more at school. So they're all, and Teresa and I, not so much. But
and that might be another factor why Kenyans are naturally better runners. The skipping and the jumping and the plyometrics and the bouncing. We know that's such an important factor with running. It doesn't mean that anyone watching this has to go and suddenly do 20 minutes of skipping, because we know that you need to be foundationally strong before you can do that explosive stuff. But if you're doing strength training, then your end goal should be to incorporate skipping, to incorporate your box jumps and your plyometric stuff. So yeah, that's all good stuff. So
I would like to have exercise that you're moving and as well doing the weights, not something that like pulling the weight. It's definitely acting on the muscles that you use while running. But when you come do press up, bench press, analyzing it, you see that there's some muscles that you're using that you're not supposed to.
Okay, but Kate, you make us do a lot of plank.
Yeah, that's the core exercises. And when you get the core in a proper state of fitness, then the ability of your arms and the legs to move gets better. But if you run, you look beautiful when you run, when you have a conditioned core muscle. You don't you don't go running backwards. It's just there, and you have the opportunity of using the arms properly and the legs properly. And these are the things that you need in your running.
I think in the UK particularly, excuse me, in the UK we suffered because with the certain papers from 2000, there was an explosion in core training suddenly meant kind of sucking your pelvic floor muscles and kind of all this kind of intricate intrinsic training. And now we realize that you can train your core by doing whole body exercises as well. And there's a place for obviously planks, but if you can add some movement to a plank, if you can add some leg movement, add some arm movement, make it more difficult. The problem we've got in the UK is we have plank challenges every January, and people trying to do 4-minute planks, 5-minute planks, 6-minute planks. And that's just creating rigidity instead of stability. We need to use our cores when we're moving. That's running. We don't use our cores when we're just standing still in a straight line. So just in case any runners there start trying to join in and doing 6-minute planks. Do you know what the world record for a plank is?
I don't know.
Have a guess.
Is it 2 hours?
More. Something like, I think last time I looked, it was something like 4 hours, 36 minutes.
Oh,
yeah, some US Marine smoking a cigar, going, God damn it, if our boys in Afghanistan can do it, then I can do it too. And it was just, but it just shows, like, what's the point of doing a 5-minute play? Is he going to be a better runner? Mentally, yeah, incredible. But anyway.
But so, more again to every exercise, everything that you do as an athlete, you ought to have a professional eye seeing it to you, because you can do something that would, without your knowing, you're not doing it right, and then it comes out negative. But when you have a professional eye taking care of you, then you do the right thing.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. Yeah. Having that extrinsic feedback, someone watching you and guiding you and telling you, because you can't see yourself, can you? Yeah, and the same goes when you're running. Yeah, no, then wonderful.
There's kind of coaching in telephone. You need the athlete. Say it's coach, I did the 200 and 22 or blah 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 blah, but how did you get that time? How were you? How did you use the arms? How were you?
Yeah.
Someone to be there to see, because you can be a distance away. When you come to meet, you see a different person. Now, getting to chop and do this, then it's better. I would advise people to be close to each other, the coach and the athlete.
Wonderful words.
And distant coaching.
Coach, how do you feel about working with the recreational runners that we've got in our group, as opposed to working with elites? Do you find that we listen more, listen less? Do you see us changing? I know consistency is an issue, because at the moment we're only once a week. But
at the moment, I haven't got. I'm trying to learn from you people to get you to see.
That's a nice way of putting it.
You want. And then after that, then I'll come up with my recipe.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I just miss our morning conversations like this. The few days I was over in Nairobi, because we had the pleasure of staying with your family, George, and this is the sort of stuff he was coming out with when I was standing at like 6:30 in the morning on your balcony and at the front door. And he'd be saying, your Juliet balcony. No, but I mean on that kind of, it's just, and then Coach Simba would come out with words of wisdom like this, and it was just like the trees, the birds, Coach Simba giving me this philosophy, and it was just complete. I haven't felt the same since, I'm afraid. I like it.
Hopefully we'll get some. I'm trying to get Ian Griffiths to come out, so I hope he's watching.
There's a plug for Ian. Yeah, no, I'm glad he's he had that call. He's really good. Okay, so let's finish up what we got. 10 minutes left. There we go. Amboseli National Park. So one of the other great. I had this dilemma, didn't I, when I was over there, of either going to Eldoret and seeing kind of the elites train, or going to Amboseli and getting a photo of a giraffe for my little boy. So obviously this time around I had to go for the safari. So I'm sorry, diehard runners, but I missed out on opportunity. But we had some fun there. It was interesting. when we arrived at kind of 1 o'clock in the morning, because the journey was took slightly longer. I can't think why the journey took longer than we planned. It might have had something to do with maybe the vehicle we were traveling. I don't know. But we still managed to have some food. And we got the picture of the giraffe for my son, which is exactly the one I gave him. So that was my job done. And then things got a little bit interesting, didn't they? With we saw some elephants, beautiful. More of them later on. And then there were some dilemmas, George, which made me realize how you've managed to set up a company in Kenya and kind of with your patience and determination. What we can see there, obviously, is a kind of a nice 4-wheel drive vehicle crossing a slightly broken, flooded bridge. There's some more 4-wheeled vehicles with a stress on 4-wheel drive crossing the water. George, you seem to believe that we could do that in a 2-wheel in a Nissan.
Yeah, well, I would have said, yeah, we could have made it through that puddle, but as you know, I drove my other car into a puddle yesterday and have possibly written it up. So I'm not. Maybe you made the right call on that, but the engine's nice and high on this, and we would have been fine.
You still reckon we should have done it? Yeah.
All I'm saying is one of the tracks would have got us out if after the first meeting.
That wasn't one of the most interesting. I mean, there was you still determined, looking at the water, thinking we can do this. It was just ridiculous. And then then we had the episode with the elephants, didn't we?
Yeah.
Where we had kind of like 1 in front and 3 behind, and you couldn't actually see. We were stuck on a bridge in between this swampland, and because you were on the passenger side, then you couldn't see how much room there was down my side for the elephants.
I was that's the most scared I've been on a safari.
And that was one of them passing our window, which gave you a brief idea of how big these mothers were. It was when you said to me, I honestly don't know what we should do. You had no idea. There's me miles away from my family and my wife with my guide on safari, and he's there just pricking himself, saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.
Come on, you just come back.
Fortunately, they moved on eventually. Yeah. Because it wasn't just that.
It was fine after that, right? We didn't have any more problems.
We had no more problems after that at all. Fortunately, we didn't get pushed into the swamp where there was a bison. Is when you said to me, the main problem, Matt, is if they push us into the swamp, the animal that's most responsible for deaths on safari is waiting there for us, watching us. And there was a bison in the swamp just watching, sitting out a picnic, waiting for us to land in the water. Yeah, we went off road later on and got stuck in the sand and had to dig ourselves out. I still don't quite understand how we can be outside the van for half an hour trying to dig sand out when there's lions and hippos around us. I don't understand the dynamics of a safari still.
Yeah.
And every time we got out of the van, there was one point we got out of the van you got a table out and some chairs, and we started eating some, what was it? It was like, it was lovely. And you said, yeah, it's fine, even though I could see kind of animals moving around towards us. Yeah. The security didn't seem to agree with you, did they, George?
No, they weren't too happy. But
they don't like people coming out of safari, getting out of their vans, do they, when you've got lions around? Yeah, it was interesting. But yeah, we had a great time. It was amazing. And it was all part of my Run Beyond experience. It was fantastic. And yeah. Well, gentlemen, it's 10:25. It's 55 minutes has shot by. I'm really looking forward to people being able to watch this on the recording. It will go up onto YouTube and my website, supportingyouback.co.uk. It will be available on Facebook after this finishes, as well as a recording. Coach Simba, thank you in particular to you for your words of wisdom, and thank you for joining Run Beyond in your coaching capacity to help George set out what I think is a very exciting and very altruistic. That's the main thing. I remember we were kind of talking about George behind his back on his Juliet balcony, and just saying how lovely it was working with somebody who wasn't in for it. You know, there's so much pressure these days to do it for the money, for the fame, and it was obvious just after 5 minutes of talking to George that the whole project and company is just to help East African runners have access to running. you know, because not all Africans are elite runners. There's lots of them can't go out because it's dangerous. They haven't got access to the information. So it's just altruism in its best. Do you think that's a good way of summing up George Coach Simba, Mr. Altruist?
Well,
I would caveat it, but I do hope that we can pay some bills with it.
That's your wife talking.
And if I lose all our savings, yeah, Teresa ain't going to be too
That's
happy.
Teresa. That's the Teresa voice in your head.
I'll caveat that.
Yeah, but what drives you, I believe, will help is, you're not doing it just for the money. Basically, you're doing it because your passion is running, obviously, and you just want to, spread the good words. So, any other words before we go our ways once again?
From me, I would want to let everybody trust himself, believe in himself, and be what he wants to be.
God, again, I've got hairs on the back of my neck just standing up. I'm going out for a run later. Jesus, I'm going to make Abel Kiprop look like nothing. I'm going to be 1,500 meters like this, just thinking of your words.
When we came together with Abel Kiprop, this was after he could not make it to, was it Berlin or where was it?
The Beijing?
Beijing Junior. He could not make it. He was number 3, number 4. But I saw that there was something there that needed to be a bit of panel beating and adding some new kind of thing, and work on the carburetor. And there he was, 206, 207, a world champion, cross country.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing.
And more to that. Now, if you come to Kenya and try to find where are these other 3 who beat Kiprop, where are they? This is number 4, top of the world. Where are these other 3? You know, shows maybe the training they only picked for that competition. They didn't think of making themselves a complete athlete, complete thing to be there today, tomorrow, and day after. That's the beauty of being a sportsman. Yeah.
Well, follow that, George. What are you going to say?
Yeah, good to see you, Matt.
How do you follow that up?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate your willingness to come out and be part of this and share your experience and knowledge. This is for me. This whole project is, it's not a George Parks project. I've had phenomenal support from, I think I told you Shankara Smith, the Run and Become, and one of her staff, Helena Laxo, came out and did a retail training with us. People like Ian Griffiths, like you say, have been willing to engage and help support us. Find our way through what's a real sort of confusing, mass of information and advice and philosophies to get through to find something that I think is hopefully gonna work and add value. So I appreciate the time that you spent coming out here and leaving your family at home, and I hope next time we'll bring you'll all come out. Yeah, again.
It's just me. No, I'm joking. Okay. Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it? That'd be great. All right, well, wicked, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Asante Sana, for everything. And I'm going to whip you 2 off the screen now and just say goodbye to everyone else who's watching or watching the recording. So again, thank you very much, you 2. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll do a follow-up on this in a few months' time once your doors are officially open. And we'll see how things are going along, and we'll hear about your continued PBs. Okay, guys. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Right then, so another hour leaves. Finishes. Those of you watching live, thank you very much for your comments. Lucy, thank you very much. great to hear from you again. If you're watching the recording, then if you're watching on YouTube, then obviously like and subscribe, as you always see. We are thinking about potentially putting this out as a podcast as well. I'm chatting to somebody about that. Obviously, you wouldn't have the visual, but you just have the MP3 version. But I think if we change a few things in the format, then that would be a worthwhile project to get involved in as well, because the feedback has been great. Not so much Sunday 9:30 in the morning, but for people listening in their own time in the car, or it seems like some of the information that we're putting out there is actually getting through, which is why we do it. So the most important thing, again, just a reminder, if you do enjoy what we said, if you've enjoyed what Coach Simba has said, his words of wisdom, if you enjoyed George Parks and the whole project and the ethos and everything, then do please kind of like the video and share it with your friends, get the word out there. Yeah, because that's what makes it possible. None of us get paid for this. These guys you've just seen, all the guests do it for free. It's just to try and get the information out. That's what we do. So once again, thank you very much. Hopefully, next Sunday. Oh, big man next Sunday. Well, not a big man. He's quite short, but yeah. Keep in tune with Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and you'll see who's on next week for our last episode before Christmas. Right, 10:30. Thank you very much again to George and Coach Simba, and we'll see you next week. Thank you and goodbye.